What happens when the people you love most become strangers you no longer recognize? My name is Margaret Chen, and I'm 56 years old. For 30 years, I built a successful catering and event planning business with my bare hands, raised 3 children I adored, and believed that unconditional trust was the foundation of family. I gave my children everything: my time, my money, my blind faith. I never questioned their choices, never doubted their intentions, never set boundaries I thought might hurt their feelings. Today, I'm sitting in a small rented apartment, estranged from 2 of my 3 children, watching my life's work crumble because I confused love with neglect. This is the story of how my greatest strength became my most devastating weakness, and the painful lessons I learned when trust without wisdom destroyed everything I held dear. I grew up in a strict immigrant household where love was shown through sacrifice, not words. My parents came to America with 2 suitcases and dreams bigger than their circumstances. My father worked in a restaurant kitchen for 16 hours a day, and my mother sewed clothes in a factory while taking care of 4 children. Affection was rare, praise was earned, never given freely. Rules were absolute, and breaking them brought swift consequences. I promised myself my children would know a different life. They would feel loved, supported, and trusted. They would never doubt that their mother believed in them unconditionally. When I met James at 24, I was working as a server while studying business at community college. He was a kind, steady man who worked as an accountant. We married quickly, and within 2 years, I had our first daughter, Claire. 2 years after that came my son, Daniel, and then 5 years later, our youngest, Lily. James provided stability while I chased my dream of building something of my own. Chen's catering started in our kitchen with a single client, a neighbor, who needed food for her daughter's graduation party. I cooked for 3 days straight, presenting dishes that combined my mother's traditional recipes with modern presentation. The neighbor was so impressed she recommended me to 5 friends. Within months, I had more requests than I could handle alone. James supported me every step of the way. He managed our finances while I built the business. I hired staff, rented commercial kitchen space, expanded into full event planning. By the time Claire was 10, Chen's catering was catering weddings, corporate events, and exclusive parties. Throughout the region, we moved into a beautiful home with a pool. The kids attended private schools. We took vacations to places I'd only dreamed of as a child. But success came with a price I didn't recognize at the time. I was constantly working, testing new recipes at midnight, managing staff conflicts, meeting with demanding clients. I missed school plays and soccer games, forgot to sign permission slips, relied on nannies and after-school programs to fill the gaps I created. The guilt consumed me, so I compensated the only way I knew how, by giving them everything else, whatever they wanted. They received new phones, expensive clothes, cars when they turned 16. When Claire struggled with math, I hired the most expensive tutor. When Daniel wanted to quit 3 different sports in 1 year, I let him without question. When Lily threw tantrums about bedtime, I let her stay up rather than fight. James sometimes questioned my approach. Margaret, they need structure, he'd say gently. They need to understand that actions have consequences, but I would dismiss his concerns. I don't want to be like my parents, I'd reply, cold and controlling. Our children will learn responsibility through love and freedom, not fear and punishment. I convinced myself that my permissiveness was progressive parenting, that my inability to say no was actually respect for their autonomy, that giving them everything they wanted was making up for the time I couldn't give them. By the time Claire graduated high school, the business was thriving beyond my wildest dreams. I had 40 employees, contracts with the city's most prestigious venues, and a reputation that brought clients from neighboring states. I started thinking about legacy, about eventually bringing my children into the business, about creating something that would support them for generations. I see now that I was living a contradiction. My business succeeded because I maintained high standards, held employees accountable, and never accepted mediocrity. But at home, I created an environment where standards didn't exist, accountability was absent. And mediocrity was not only accepted but enabled. I didn't see that children, like businesses, need structure to thrive. You can't build something lasting on guilt and overcompensation. You can't raise responsible adults by shielding them from every consequence and discomfort. Looking back at those early years, I can see the warning signs I ignored. The small moments of manipulation I dismissed as normal childhood behavior. The growing entitlement I explained away as confidence. I was so determined not to be my cold, strict mother that I became something potentially worse, a mother who loved so blindly she failed to truly see her children at all. Claire was 23 when she first approached me about joining the business. She'd graduated from an expensive private university with a degree in communications, spent 6 months traveling through Asia on my credit card, and worked briefly at marketing firms before quitting both, claiming the work environments were toxic. But she appeared at my office one morning with a portfolio, a confident smile, and a polished pitch. "Mum, I want to modernize the business," she said. "Social media, influencer partnerships, brand evolution. I can take Chen's catering to the next level." My heart swelled with pride and relief. My firstborn, finally ready to join me, to learn what I'd built, to eventually carry forward the legacy I'd created. This was what I'd worked for, not just success for myself, but opportunity for my children. James urged caution during dinner that night. "Make her start small," he suggested. "Let her prove herself in an entry-level position first." But I saw this as my chance to finally give Claire the time and attention I'd failed to provide during our childhood. We would work together, bond together, build together. I created a position for her, Director of Marketing and Brand Development. The title came with a generous salary, a company car, an expense account, and an office next to mine. I wanted her to feel valued and important. I wanted her to know I believed in her completely. The first few months seemed promising. Claire posted beautiful photos on Instagram, redesigned our website, and talked enthusiastically about her vision. She was charming with clients and confident in meetings. I felt proud introducing her as my daughter and future partner, but gradually I noticed concerning patterns. Claire arrived late most mornings, often leaving for long lunches that stretched into the afternoon. She'd disappear for client meetings that never resulted in new contracts. When I gently asked about her projects, she'd become defensive. "You have to trust me, Mom. You can't micromanage my process." "That's not how creative work happens." I backed off immediately, not wanting to be the controlling mother I'd sworn I'd never become. I told myself she needed space to find her approach, that different generations worked differently, that my discomfort was just resistance to change. Then I discovered she'd been using the company expense account for personal shopping. Designer handbags, expensive dinners with friends, weekend trips to luxury resorts, all charged to Chen's catering and categorized as business development. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. Instead, she cried, "I work so hard for you. And you're nickel and diming me over expenses." She sobbed, "Do you know how stressful it is trying to live up to your reputation? I need these things to network with the right people, to represent the brand properly. You built this business by taking risks. Why won't you let me do the same?" I felt terrible. Perhaps I was being too harsh, too focused on small details instead of her overall vision. Perhaps this was how modern business worked. I apologized for making her feel unsupported and increased her expense account limit. James was less understanding when I told him that evening. "Margaret, she's manipulating you," he said. His voice tight with frustration. "She's taking advantage of your guilt and your inability to hold her accountable." His words stung because somewhere deep inside, I knew he was right, but admitting that meant admitting I'd failed as a mother. That my approach had been wrong, that I'd created this problem through years of permissiveness disguised as love. So I defended Claire instead. "You don't understand the pressure she's under," I told James. "She's trying to prove herself in her mother's business. That's not easy." Over the following months, Claire's behavior escalated. She missed important client meetings, blamed her mistakes on staff members, and spent more time taking selfies for social media than actually working. But each time I tried to address these issues, she'd either cry, accuse me of not trusting her, or remind me of how much she'd sacrificed to help me. And every time, I retreated. Because confronting her meant risking her love, risking our relationship, and risking the fantasy I'd built of us working together as partners. I chose peace over truth, comfort over growth. I chose blind trust over wise love. I didn't know then that this pattern would become the blueprint for my downfall. While I was navigating the complicated situation with Claire, my son Daniel was spiraling in ways I completely failed to recognize. At 21, he dropped out of college during his junior year, claiming the education system was broken and not designed for creative thinkers like him. I'd been devastated when he quit, but I hid my disappointment behind supportive words. "Education isn't for everyone," I told him, echoing phrases I'd read in progressive parenting articles. "Some of the most successful people never finished college. Follow your passion." Daniel moved back home, and I was secretly glad to have him close again. He spent most of his time in his room, which he'd converted into a recording studio. He was going to be a music producer, he explained. He just needed time to build his portfolio and connections. Months passed. Daniel slept until noon, stayed up until 4 in the morning working on beats, and rarely left his room except to eat. When James suggested he get a part-time job to develop work ethic and responsibility, I defended Daniel. "He's an artist," I insisted. "He needs time and space to develop his craft. I won't force him into some meaningless job that crushes his creativity." James's expression darkened. "You're not helping him, Margaret. You're enabling him." But I couldn't hear it. I saw Daniel's situation through the lens of my own past. My parents never understood my dreams, never supported my ambitions. I would be different. I would believe in my son even when he didn't believe in himself. I gave Daniel money whenever he asked. Money for new equipment, for online courses, for networking events that seemed to happen at expensive clubs downtown. I convinced myself I was investing in his future, supporting his passion the way my parents never supported mine. Then one night, James came to bed with his jaw clenched. "I need to show you something," he said, handing me his phone. It was Daniel's social media account, filled with photos and videos of him at parties, surrounded by bottles of expensive alcohol, designer clothes I'd never seen him wear, and captions boasting about his lavish lifestyle. My stomach dropped. "Maybe it's not as bad as it looks," I whispered. "Young people exaggerate on social media." "Margaret, where do you think he's getting the money?" James asked quietly. "You give him $500 for equipment, and it turns into bottles. At nightclubs, you give him $1,000 for a course, and it becomes designer sneakers." I felt defensive anger rising in my chest. "So he's made some poor choices. He's young. He'll learn." When James's voice broke, "When will he learn if there are never any consequences? When will he develop responsibility if we keep enabling him?" We fought that night, truly fought for the first time in years. James wanted me to set boundaries, to stop giving Daniel money, to require him to get a job. I accused him of being unsupportive, of not understanding creative careers, of wanting to control our son the way my parents controlled me. "I'm not trying to control him," James said, exhausted. "I'm trying to save him from becoming someone who can't function in the real world. And I'm trying to save you from the pain that's coming if you don't wake up." But I didn't listen. Instead, I doubled down. When Daniel came to me crying 2 weeks later, saying he'd been scammed by someone he'd met online who'd promised to help with his music career and needed money to fix the situation, I believed him. I gave him $3,000 without asking questions. James moved into the guest room that night. "I can't watch this anymore," he said quietly. "I can't watch you destroy our son by calling it love." I told myself he was being dramatic, that he didn't understand. But late at night, alone in our bed, doubt crept in. Was I helping Daniel or hurting him? Was I being supportive or simply being a coward who couldn't face the hard truth that my parenting approach might be fundamentally flawed? I pushed those questions away. Confronting them meant confronting my own failure, and I wasn't ready for that yet. The consequences of my blindness were approaching like a freight train. I just couldn't see them coming. While Claire manipulated me at work and Daniel drained our savings at home, my youngest daughter Lily seemed like proof that my parenting approach could work. At 18, she was bright, beautiful, and seemingly responsible. She'd graduated high school with decent grades, gotten accepted to a state university, and appeared to be the one child who'd actually absorbed the values I'd tried to instill. I clung to Lily as evidence that I wasn't a complete failure as a mother. See, I'd tell myself, Lily turned out fine. The problems with Claire and Daniel are just individual personality issues, not a parenting problem. Lily was affectionate in ways my other children weren't. She'd hug me when I came home, ask about my day, and tell me she loved me. After the tension with Claire at work and the worry about Daniel at home, Lily's warmth felt like a refuge. When she asked if she could take a gap year before starting college to volunteer and travel, I agreed immediately. When she asked for money for the trip, I gave it without hesitation. When she asked for more money a month later, claiming her travel expenses were higher than expected, I sent it. James tried to intervene. "Margaret, we need to see receipts. We need a budget. We need some kind of accountability. She's volunteering at orphanages in Central America." I snapped. "She's doing something meaningful with her life." Unlike, I stopped myself before finishing, but we both knew I meant unlike. Her siblings. What I didn't know was that Lily had learned from watching Claire and Daniel. She'd observed exactly how to manipulate me, which emotional buttons to push, which words made me retreat from accountability. She'd seen that tears worked, that invoking my guilt worked, that playing the victim worked. Lily wasn't volunteering at orphanages. She was island hopping with a boyfriend I'd never met, staying at beach resorts, and posting carefully curated photos that made her life look humanitarian while hiding the reality. Every few weeks, she'd send me a heartfelt message about the children she was helping and how grateful she was for a mother who believed in making a difference, and I believed her completely. I bragged about Lily to friends and clients. "My youngest is doing volunteer work in Guatemala," I'd say proudly. "She has such a good heart." When people praised her, I felt validated proof that at least one of my children appreciated what I'd given them. Meanwhile, the business was suffering under Claire's mismanagement. She'd alienated key staff members with her entitled attitude, lost clients with her unprofessionalism, and damaged our reputation with poorly planned events. But she'd also become skilled at deflecting blame, at making me doubt my own perceptions, at convincing me that any criticism of her was my own insecurity about aging or resistance to change. Daniel's situation had deteriorated further. He rarely left his room anymore. The music production dream had faded, replaced by hours of video gaming and increasingly erratic sleep patterns. When I'd peek into his room, I'd see empty energy drink cans, piles of unwashed clothes, and a young man who looked lost and hopeless, but I still couldn't bring myself to set boundaries. He's going through something, I'd tell James. He needs support, not judgment. He needs a wake-up call, James replied, his voice flat with resignation. They all do. But you'd rather lose everything than risk them being angry with you. His words haunted me, but I pushed them away. I worked harder at the business to compensate for Claire's incompetence. I gave Daniel more money, hoping it would help him feel better. I sent Lily additional funds, believing I was supporting her humanitarian work. I was so busy managing the chaos I'd created that I didn't notice what was really happening. I didn't see that Claire was planning something that would devastate me. I didn't realize Daniel's depression was actually something far more serious. And I had no idea that Lily's gap year was about to cost me more than money. The perfect storm was building, and I was too blind to see the warning signs, my inability to set boundaries, to demand accountability. To practice tough love was about to extract a price I never imagined paying. The first crack in my denial came on a Tuesday morning when my accountant, Linda, appeared at my office door looking pale. "Margaret, we need to talk," she said quietly. "There are some irregularities in the accounts I need you to see." I followed her to her office, my heart already pounding with a dread I couldn't name. She pulled up spreadsheets showing transactions I didn't recognize, $50,000 transferred over 6 months to an account I'd never authorized. Invoices paid for services never rendered, expense reports that showed a pattern of systematic theft. "I've traced most of it back to Claire's access codes," Linda said carefully. "I wanted to verify everything before I brought this to you." The room spun. I gripped the edge of her desk, trying to process what I was hearing. My daughter wasn't just misusing her expense account for handbags and dinners. She was stealing. Deliberately, systematically stealing from the business I'd built, the business I'd brought her into, as an act of love and trust. "There's more," Linda continued, her voice gentle. "She's been meeting with some of our biggest clients, apparently, offering to provide similar services at lower rates through her own company. She's been using our client lists, our vendor relationships, our recipes. She's setting up a competing business while still on our payroll." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just theft. This was calculated betrayal. This was my daughter, the child I'd carried and birthed and sacrificed for. Systematically plotting to destroy what I'd built, I confronted Claire that afternoon. I walked into her office with the printed evidence, my hands shaking, my heart breaking. For once, I was ready to demand answers, to hold her accountable, to finally be the parent I should have been years ago. But Claire was ready. She'd prepared for this moment. "Mom, sit down," she said calmly. "Let me explain before you overreact." She spun a story so elaborate, so convincing, that part of me wanted to believe it. The money wasn't stolen, it was advanced payment for projects I was developing. The competing business wasn't Betrayal, it was a sister company that would eventually merge with Chen's catering and expand our market reach. The client meetings weren't poaching, they were relationship building. That would benefit us both. "You're so suspicious of me," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "You've never really trusted me. You've always compared me to your own success, made me feel like I could never measure up. I was trying to prove myself, to build something that would make you proud, and this is how you treat me." She turned everything around, making herself the victim, making me the villain, and horrifyingly, shamefully. Part of me wanted to believe her, because accepting the truth meant accepting that I'd failed completely as a mother. It meant accepting that my love hadn't been enough, that my trust had been foolish, that my entire parenting philosophy was fundamentally broken. I need you to leave, I finally said. My voice barely above a whisper. Pack your things, you're fired. Claire's expression changed instantly from tears to cold fury. Fine, she spat. Fire me. I don't need you anyway. I've already signed 3 of your biggest clients by this time next month. Chen's catering will be irrelevant, and everyone will know that you're a bitter old woman who couldn't handle her own daughter's success. She walked out, leaving me sitting in her office, surrounded by the expensive furniture I'd bought her, staring at the framed photos of us together that now felt like evidence of my own stupidity. I called James, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. You were right, I choked out, about everything. You were right. I know, he said quietly. Come home, we need to talk about Daniel. Those words sent ice through my veins. What about Daniel? Just come home, Margaret, please. I drove home in a daze, my perfect world crumbling around me. I thought I'd hit rock bottom with Claire's betrayal. I had no idea how much further I had yet to fall. The blindness I'd called love was about to cost me something far more precious than money or business success. When I arrived home, I found James sitting at the kitchen table with our neighbor, Dr. Sarah Patel, and another man I didn't recognize. The stranger wore a professional but compassionate expression that immediately set off alarm bells. Margaret, this is David Chen, no relation. James said he's an intervention specialist. An intervention? My voice came out higher than intended. For what? For Daniel, James said quietly. He's been using drugs, Margaret, not just marijuana, harder things. He's been stealing from us, lying to us. And he's been doing it for over a year. I shook my head violently. No, he's just depressed. He's struggling with direction, with motivation. He's struggling with opioid addiction. Dr. Patel interrupted gently. She'd been our neighbor for 5 years, had become a friend. I've suspected for months. The signs were all there. The isolation, the sleep patterns, the physical changes you've probably attributed to depression. David Chen opened a folder and showed me photographs. They were from Daniel's room, taken when James had finally gone in to investigate. Pills hidden in various places. Paraphernalia I couldn't even identify. Evidence of a problem so serious, so dangerous, that my denial suddenly seemed not just foolish but potentially deadly. The money you've been giving him hasn't been going to equipment or courses, James said, his voice breaking. It's been feeding his addiction. Every dollar you gave him with love, he used to destroy himself. And I tried to tell you, Margaret. For months I tried to tell you. I collapsed into a chair, the weight of my blindness crushing me. How long have you known? I've suspected for 6 months. I've known for certain for 2 months. I've been trying to convince you to see it. But you wouldn't listen. You never listen when it comes to the kids. The intervention specialist explained the plan. Daniel needed intensive inpatient treatment. He needed to be confronted with the reality of his addiction and given an ultimatum: accept help or face the consequences of his choices. Where is he? I asked. Upstairs. We've been waiting for you. What followed was the most painful hour of my life. We gathered in the living room. James, Dr. Patel, David Chen, and me. James went upstairs and brought Daniel down. My son looked like a stranger. Thin, pale, with dark circles under his eyes that I'd somehow convinced myself were just from late nights working on music. Each of us spoke. Dr. Patel talked about the medical dangers. David Chen talked about the path forward. James talked about his love and his fear. And then it was my turn. I looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time in years. And I saw the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't a creative soul who needed space to find himself. This was a young man in crisis who needed boundaries, accountability, and tough love, everything I'd failed to provide. Daniel, I began, tears streaming down my face. I've failed you. I called it love, but it was cowardice. I gave you money and freedom because it was easier than giving you what you actually needed: discipline, structure, and a parent willing to let you be angry with me if it meant keeping you safe. I told him about the treatment center, about the requirement that he go immediately. If you refuse, I said, forcing the words out, you can no longer live here. You can no longer have access to our money. I love you too much to keep enabling your destruction. Daniel looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then he said something that shattered what remained of my heart. You don't love me, Mom. You love the idea of being the cool, understanding parent. You love feeling like you're better than your parents, but you never actually saw me. You never cared enough to notice I was drowning. He was right. God help me, he was right. After hours of tears, anger, and painful honesty, Daniel agreed to go to treatment. As James helped him pack, I sat alone in the kitchen, confronting the reality that my blind trust hadn't been love at all. It had been selfishness disguised as compassion, fear disguised as acceptance, and I still had no idea what Lily had been doing. While Daniel was in treatment and I was struggling to keep the business afloat after Claire's betrayal, Lily came home. She walked through the door with her suitcase, her face tanned and her hair sun-bleached, looking like the poster child for humanitarian travel. Mom, she called out cheerfully. I'm home. She hugged me tightly, and I held onto her like a drowning person holds onto a life raft. At least one of my children was okay. At least one of my children had turned out well. How was the volunteer work? I asked, desperate to hear something positive, to have evidence that I hadn't completely failed as a mother. Lily's smile faltered for just a second before recovering. Incredible. Life-changing. I have so much to tell you. She looked around. Where's Dad? We need to talk. Lily, James said, appearing in the doorway. His voice was flat, emotionless, all three of us. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. We sat in the living room, and James pulled out his laptop. I hired a private investigator, he said, looking at Lily, after everything with Claire and Daniel. I needed to know the truth about where our money was really going. Lily's face went pale. What are you talking about? James turned the laptop so we could both see. Photos filled the screen. Lily at beach resorts, nightclubs, expensive restaurants. Lily with a much older man, his arm around her waist, receipts for luxury hotels, designer shopping, first-class flights, no orphanages, no volunteer work, no humanitarian efforts at all. You sent our daughter to spy on me. Lily's voice was shrill with indignation. I sent an investigator to find out the truth. James replied calmly. Because your mother gave you over $30,000 for what you claimed was volunteer work, and I needed to know if we were funding yet another lie. I couldn't speak. I stared at the photos. At this daughter I'd held up as my success story, my proof that unconditional trust and support could work. She'd been lying the entire time. And not just lying, she'd crafted an elaborate deception specifically designed to manipulate my emotion. And my guilt. Who is he? James asked, pointing to the older man in the photos. Lily's defiance crumbled. The truth spilled out in a rush. The man was 43, married, wealthy. She'd met him online. And he'd promised to leave his wife, to set her up with a business, to give her the life she deserved. The volunteer work story was her cover for spending months with him while he figured things out with his family. You used your mother's guilt and her need to believe in you to fund an affair with a married man? James's voice was ice. You don't understand, Lily cried. He loves me. He's going to leave her. We're going to be together. Mom always said to follow your heart, that love was the most important thing. Don't. I finally spoke, my voice shaking with rage I'd never allowed myself to feel toward my children. Don't you dare use my words to justify this. I never taught you to be a liar. I never taught you to be a mistress. I never taught you to Manipulate people who love you. You taught me that I deserved everything I wanted, Lily shot back. You taught me that other people's rules didn't apply to me. You taught me that if I cried or said the right things, I could get whatever I needed. I learned from the master, Mom. The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. She was right. I had taught her this, not with my words, but with my actions, or rather, my inaction. By never setting boundaries, never demanding accountability, never allowing my children to face the natural consequences of their choices, I taught them that manipulation was love, that tears were currency, and that the world existed to serve their desires. James was watching me, waiting to see what I would do. Would I retreat into enabling again, or would I finally stand firm? Pack your things, I told Lily, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. You're not staying here. For the first time in their lives, I was choosing truth over comfort. 6 months have passed since everything fell apart. 6 months since I fired Claire, since Daniel went to treatment, since I asked Lily to leave. 6 months of the hardest, most painful growth I've ever experienced. The business offered, Claire, did steal some clients, and the damage to my reputation required months of personal outreach and damage control. I had to let staff go, scale back operations, and rebuild trust with vendors and clients who'd heard rumors about family drama. There were nights I thought I might lose everything I'd spent 30 years building, but slowly, painfully, I began to understand what I should have learned decades ago. Real love requires boundaries, true support means holding people accountable, and trust, authentic trust, must be earned and maintained through consistent integrity, not given blindly because of biological connection. Daniel completed his 90-day treatment program. When he came home, James and I sat him down with a written agreement. He would live at home rent-free for 6 months while he attended outpatient treatment and found a job, any job. After 6 months, he'd pay modest rent or find his own place. He'd have no access to our money beyond what he earned himself. He'd submit to random drug tests. Breaking any of these rules meant he had to leave. I expected him to rage, to accuse me of being unloving, to tell me I was just like my strict parents after all. Instead, he cried and said, "Thank you. I needed this years ago." He's been sober for 4 months now. He works at a warehouse, a job he initially resented but has grown to appreciate. He talks about the dignity of earning his own money, about the self-respect that comes from meeting commitments. He's not producing music, but he's alive, healthy, and learning how to be a functioning adult. We have a relationship now that's based on honesty instead of enabling. Claire and I don't speak. She sends occasional emails through lawyers regarding the business disputes we're resolving. Her competing business failed within 3 months. It turns out that stealing clients is easier than actually serving them well. I've heard she's back living with her boyfriend's parents. Part of me wants to rescue her, to offer her another chance. But I've learned that some people need to hit bottom before they're willing to climb back up. The most loving thing I can do is let her experience the full weight of her choices. Lily stayed with the married man for 2 months before he predictably decided not to leave his wife. She called me from a bus station in Florida, broke and desperate. Every instinct screamed at me to wire her money, to save her, to bring her home. Instead, I told her I loved her, gave her the number for a women's shelter, and said I'd be here when she was ready to take responsibility for her life. She's working at a restaurant now, living with roommates, and slowly learning that the world doesn't revolve around her desires. We talk once a week, careful, tentative conversations where I practice something revolutionary: listening without fixing, caring without controlling, loving without enabling. James and I are rebuilding our marriage, the distance that grew between US over years of disagreement about the children is slowly closing. We're learning to be partners again, to trust each other's judgment, to present a united front. He told me recently that he's proud of the changes I've made, that he sees the courage it takes to admit such fundamental mistakes. The business is stabilizing. I've hired a new marketing director who earned the position through competence, not biology. I'm working with a therapist to understand how my childhood wounds led me to create the opposite. Problem for my children: how I swung from one extreme to another without finding healthy balance in the middle. I'm learning that the opposite of a bad thing isn't necessarily a good thing. The opposite of strict, withholding parents isn't permissive, boundaryless parents. The opposite of fear-based control isn't blind trust. Real love exists in the difficult middle ground where you set boundaries because you care, where you hold people accountable because you respect them, where you let people face consequences because you believe in their ability to grow. My biggest mistake wasn't trusting my children. It was confusing trust with abdication, love with avoidance, and support with enabling. I thought I was being a better parent than my mother. Instead, I was being a different kind of failure. Today, I'm learning to be something harder but far more valuable, a parent who loves with wisdom, who trusts with discernment, and who cares enough to be temporarily disliked if it means helping her children become people of character and integrity. The road ahead is long. The relationships may never fully heal, but I'm finally on the right path, not the easy path, not the comfortable,